what if you want an EV with a luxury badge but don't want to pay those very high prices or don't even want the blistering performance? Then this single motor XC40 Recharge might have some answers for you. Look very closely and you notice that you don't get fog lamps or pixel LED lighting with this version. But otherwise you have that smart, restrained Volvo look. The front works well with the blanked out grille, slim vents and clamshell bonnet. The wide haunches, the 171mm of ground clearance and proportionate glass house makes for an appealing look that carries over to the rear. The efficiency-focused 19-inch wheels fit in well too. You have a sizable 31-litre frunk and 419-litre boot. It's a practical space but needs to hold the spare wheel, eating into usability. Now there's no real way to tell the cabin of this lower single motor variant of the XC40 Recharge apart from the higher trim, and that's no bad thing because what you still get is a contemporary space. I mean, the XC40 in various forms has been around a long time, but the cabin still remains really quite contemporary despite all the new entrants that you've had in this sort of space. Now why do I say it? It's because of the quality of the materials, and while the layout itself is a bit dark with the color scheme, you notice that everything is soft here. So you have this felt lining in the doors which is quite nice. And really this is what stands out the most, this sort of topographic highlighting here, and the way it shines at night is really quite something. Some of the bits are maybe not as nice as what's the standard in this segment. For example, this panel here, some of the plastics here maybe could have been textured, or there could have been a bit more, differentiation in terms of materials, or some of these buttons here. Now this being a Volvo, of course, another trait that you can't miss is practicality. Now to start with, there's a lot of eco-friendliness inside here because this is an EV, so a lot of the mats and a lot of this suede here that you see here is recycled or from microplastics, which is thoughtful. The front seats have just the right cushioning and support helped by extendable squabs. There's big door pockets, a deep cubbyhole with a removable garbage bin, and a thoughtfully arranged center console. The 9-inch central touchscreen now feels a touch too small, not helped by the portrait orientation, but the Google integration is still great. iPhone users may have some trouble, but you get Apple CarPlay to tide over this. The 12.3-inch driver's display is minimalistic and clean, although a few more layout options would have been nice. Now to start with, there is a pretty decent amount of space. I mean, it's par for the course in this segment, in fact slightly better considering I can put my feet right underneath here. For my height, there's a lot of knee room and leg room, as you can see. Headroom is also quite decent. Not especially great, but still good. This window is slightly small, but just enough to give you an airy feel. And the seat is wide too. Yeah, a third passenger will be troubled by this quite high center console, and that's why we get to the part of this XC40 being based on an IC architecture. And so that's one aspect of it. But you also notice that maybe you could have done with more under-thigh support. The floor has been pushed up and also I think pushed forward because the motor and all the control units sit behind me over here. So that also means that the seat I think is angled a bit more forward compared to the IC XC40. So yeah, for some of you that might be slightly uncomfortable. But aside from that, the cushioning, at least we find it pretty decent. It's again slightly firm, but you should be fairly comfortable. Some amenities, you have this space here. It's quite comfortable to put your arm here. Of course, AC vents, same high quality as the front, and 2 Type-C charge ports. Now another thing that the XC40 does, which is considering the window is a bit too tiny, maybe seeing out of the back might be an issue, is that you can fold down the headrest. With this lesser version, you lose out on features like pixel LED headlamps, fog lamps, 360-degree cameras and a Harman Kardon sound system. That being said, the E60 variant gets features such as these. As you would expect from a Volvo, safety isn't compromised. You get a full suite of ADAS functions with rear collision support, hill descent control and 7 airbags. Now, as you know, with these Volvos, there's no keys, so you just get in, buckle up, put it in drive and set off, and it's still a novelty. It's not the first time that we're driving these cars, but it's a novelty that's not worn off yet. And as soon as you start driving, you realize that the outputs, they're much lesser than what the dual motor version makes. It's about 238 PS and 420 Newton meters, but by no means does it feel inadequate. In fact, it feels just right, just about at par with say, a lot of the ICE cars in that segment, but with that briskness, that immediacy that you have with an EV. So yeah, you start off like how you would in pretty calmly. There's no drive mode. It's very simple with a Volvo, right? They don't have any drive modes, anything of that sort. The only thing that you can change is the regen, so where you can put it in either auto or single pedal driving. But we think that this auto mode really is quite intuitive. It uses the ADAS function, the ADAS hardware to detect what's happening. For example, now it's rolling, but if someone were to come in front of me, it would just come right down to a complete halt, which is quite smart. It then starts to pick up in much the same way as the dual motor version, with a soft linear pull that's manageable in traffic. But unlike the big boost in performance, there's a growing swell that again goes with the soft demeanor of the car. You still have enough grunt for most situations, and helpfully the performance doesn't seem to fade away as you pass triple-digit speeds. This version of the XC40 Recharge uses a smaller 69 kWh battery pack. That being said, WLTP range hasn't seen a especially big drop given that it's drawing much less power. So you have a rated 475 kilometers. We couldn't put this EV through a full real-world test, although we did see an indicated 350 kilometers of range at 81% charge. So over 400 kilometers on a full charge can be easily expected in regular driving. Charging speeds are also good, although not the best in the segment. This car feels a lot lighter on its feet, a lot more nimble. It doesn't have that sort of sense of heft, at least compared to the dual motor version. You have a much smaller battery. You have just a single motor at the back, so it feels a bit more energetic. It feels like, a bit more of a driver's car. The usual EV traits help in that regard. All the weight is low down, so it feels planted at any speed, and helping that is the suspension tuning. Now, even though it's riding 19-inch wheels, you do notice that even over fairly rough surfaces, it holds itself. It's a bit noisy, yes, but you don't feel yourself being moved around too much in the cabin, which really is quite nice. And then of course, as the road sort of smoothens out, as you build speed, just becomes even more stable, even more composed, and even more like how you want a luxury car to be. There's also some fun that you can have out of this. So now the steering in it has a standard setting like this, which is just fine for most conditions. For example, it's just light enough in the city. It's reasonably direct, not the most direct, but it gets the job done. And then as you build speed, it sort of becomes heavier more progressively. So it's sort of one-size-fits-all steering wheel. But if you did want, say, a bit more connection, you do get a steering wheel firm function, but really we wouldn't bother with it. All that does is just add weight and doesn't really improve directness. But in any case, you do feel more connected to the car than, say, in the dual motor version, which is Harman. Priced at Rs 54.95 lakh, the Volvo XC40 Recharge E60 is only 2.95 lakh less than the all-wheel drive E80 variant. We think this is too narrow a gap between the two versions, which will push most buyers to the top trim anyway. If this single motor version were to be priced at around Rs 50 lakh, it would make for an enticing package with the ambience and equipment it offers, along with the impressive efficiency and driving character.